Hey everybody, it's Big Lair here, the Jack's Private Coffee Corner. Today I'm going to do something different. This will be part of my Coffee Talk video series. I wrote a book that I had published back in May. I don't remember the exact day in May now, maybe around the 17th. And it's called Emails from a Ninja, My Japanese Father-in-Law's Secret Life. And the reason I'm going to talk about this book today, actually I'm going to make this a series of videos. It may take a while to go through them all, but once a week I'll try and put a video out for everyone on Patreon, all my patrons. And you'll get a glimpse into the book that I wrote here. I think the book is about 200 pages long. And okay, just let me I'm going to read the two paragraphs that I have written on Amazon, which is on the selling page, that kind of give you a very quick background on this, and then I'll tell you, why I want to talk about this. Okay, here goes. I'm just going to read from the Amazon page. Some say the origins of ninjutsu, the art of the ninja, can be traced back to almost 900 years ago in Japan. The techniques, knowledge, and training of these warrior assassins was kept a secret as generations of ninja families used this information to ply their trade. As can be imagined, outsiders would never be let into this mysterious and often dangerous world. Over centuries of war and fighting among various clans, the ninja raised their martial art to the highest level and were sought after when impossible missions were needed to be carried out. Since the end of World War II in 1945, the need for such assassins dwindled, and many ninja families were forced to begin training foreigners in order to keep their traditions alive. While the rest of the world now had access to some of the ninjas' knowledge and techniques, many things were still kept secret within tight-knit groups of specific ninja families. Today, the internet allows us to have access to many ninja items, techniques, and some of the superficial history. What is severely lacking is an upfront and personal account of how a modern-day real ninja lives his life. This book is just that, a rare story of a Japanese ninja as he communicates by email with his American son-in-law. These fascinating, everyday accounts put the reader in the front seat of watching a true ninja master as he goes about his daily life, and more often than not shows us that the way of the warrior is just as interesting as it is entertaining. You will have a hard time putting this book down. Okay, so why am I talking about this? Well, the son-in-law, the American son-in-law, is me, right? I wrote this book about my Japanese father-in-law. And although it seems to be a story, a martial arts-based story, I actually think it has more to do with the human interest story. Because here this guy is, he's secretly living a life as a ninja, but he was also a husband, a father, a grandfather. He was a friend to many people. He was a teacher to people in different fields, not just the ninja arts, not just the art of ninjutsu, but he was also a dance teacher. And he was just an all-around stand-up guy that a lot of people in the area where he lived came to him for advice. They really looked up to this guy. So imagine him balancing all of these different roles, along with being the father-in-law to me. And that's what struck me the most, is that this was a real human story. This isn't just like, some kind of James Bond type guy. He's just an average, everyday guy who had extreme motivation. He was very driven. He was very hard on himself. He worked very hard. He was dedicated. He put his family first. Yeah, and he just went the extra mile in everything he did. You know, I have so many stories of him, and in this book there's only about 72 stories total. 72 stories, and if there's enough interest in my book, I'll write a second book. But I just wanted to introduce this to all of you just as an interesting study of human nature, a character study of someone that, you know, most people will never get to meet. And one of the things that pushed me towards making this book, writing this book, it's a lot of work, was that in America, my best friend's father was a similar individual. He was German, fought with the Germans during World War II. He was considered one of the best sculptors in the world. Then he came to America, got married, had kids, and settled down in America. And talking with him over the years, he had these amazing stories about the war, about World War II, about growing up and how things were in his life. And I always thought, man, I should really write a book about this guy. It's a fascinating guy. Well, then fast forward, you know, a number of years later, I'm in Japan, I get married, and lo and behold, my father-in-law is also one of these super interesting guys. So I said to myself, aha, I cannot let this chance pass. I have to write this book. And that's why I've done it. Okay, now I'm going to jump to the book. Let me see here. And I'm going to read from the introduction. I'll just read the introduction for this video to give you just an introduction to the whole story. Okay, here goes. So if you have the book, or if you have the ebook, this would be page 13 for me. Well, the intro starts on 13, and I don't know how the ebook is actually, because ebooks now don't always go by page numbers, they go by place, what place you are in the book. Okay, so I'm reading from the introduction of Emails from a Ninja. All right. I have wanted to write this book for several years, but life kept getting in the way. I often spoke to my Japanese father-in-law about wanting to record our conversations, and he agreed. However, our conversations often began naturally over a cup of coffee or a can of beer, and before we knew it, several hours had passed and neither of us had thought to get a recording device. While I met my father-in-law in 1999, I did not know that he was a ninja until my first son was born in 2001. Wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. The universe works in wondrous ways, as I had always had an interest in ninjutsu, which is the way of the ninja in English, and studied the subject as much as I could from my early teens. I grew up in Wisconsin, and my hometown university's library had a rare book collection, which included 2 books on Japanese martial arts, and both had chapters on ninjutsu. From there, I bought any book I could get my hands on that even mentioned the word ninja. And you must remember that Amazon did not exist in those days, and so the only choice for buying books was the local bookstore or through mail order. I did have the chance to study several martial arts through my teens and early 20s, but the chance to study ninjutsu seemed like a faraway dream. I lived in Japan for about 18 months after getting my bachelor degree in 1992, but moved back to the States before learning any Japanese or finding any ninja. My second trip to Japan came in the late 1990s. I would go on to stay in the country for a little over 14 years, this time learning to speak the language, finding a wife, and having 3 sons. In 2011, my wife and I decided to move to Malaysia for our next adventure. My story and the email exchanges between me and my father-in-law begins during this time. I can truly say that my father-in-law was a hardworking, generous, compassionate, funny, and great man. He was born 4 days after the Japanese Navy attacked Pearl Harbor on Oahu Island, Hawaii. He was raised in a rural area by parents who made their living from farming. To say his family was poor would be an understatement, but it must be noted that almost every Japanese at that time, especially before and during the war, World War II, was extremely poor. All available food and most of the country's resources went to the war effort, and so the average citizen was squeezed to the point of starvation. 3 years to the day after the Pearl Harbor attack was the devastating Tonankai earthquake of 1944. This 8.1 magnitude quake further burdened the Japanese population during the war, and my father-in-law's hometown saw destruction from the initial quake and aftershocks, and then received a knockout punch with the subsequent tsunami. My father-in-law spoke of stories he later heard about how after the initial tsunami receded, the streets were lined with fish and various other sea creatures. Many people ran out into the streets to pick up the fish, as food was scarce and many were unable to buy or even get their hands on fresh seafood at that time. Unfortunately, a second tsunami came and swept many of those people back into the ocean as the giant wave receded, therefore ending the lives of many who had already suffered so much. My Japanese father-in-law attended public school until junior high and often spoke of how he disliked school and the subjects being taught. His focus was on being able to get a job, make some money, and get away from his hometown. He was able to get a job in Tokyo with one of his relatives, but said that he had to work 7 days a week for a salary so low that it took him months to buy one pair of pants. He said the room that was provided for him was a space that was 5 feet by 4 feet, with a ceiling height of 4 feet. He was not able to stand up straight and only used the room for sleeping. Despite the low pay and the cramped living quarters, he often spoke of the joy he felt living in Tokyo, Japan's most cosmopolitan city at the time, a place where all fashion trends originated and where most TV personalities and singers lived. I must stop my story here for one moment to let you, the reader, know that some facts and the names of people and places may be deleted or changed to protect certain persons who may still be alive. At times, I may appear to give only vague details while leaving others out. This is done to keep my promise to my father-in-law about certain topics, events, and people. One cannot give away all secrets, as this would take some of the mystery out of life, and where would be the fun in that? After all, what beautiful actress would tell you everything she does to maintain her beauty and gorgeous figure? What champion bodybuilder would tell you his or her supplement and performance-enhancing substance regime? The answer to both questions is no one. Look at any area of life where one or two people shine above the others, and you will surely find that those accomplished individuals keep some things to themselves. And so, I have deleted or changed some information in order to keep my word of privacy for certain individuals and events. Now that I have been transparent about that, let us continue. Back to Tokyo. I believe it was in Tokyo that my father-in-law began his ninja training. He was just a teenager then. Those were tough times in Japan's history, and many people had lost their lives during the war, whether it was fighting in the Pacific, dodging the bombs dropped by the Americans, or simply starving to death from malnutrition. On top of that, the country now had to rebuild itself in order to start generating wealth. Factories were being repurposed for peacetime production, and infrastructure needed to be repaired and updated. There were certain individuals, martial artists among them, who realized their art might die out without having a proper successor. My father-in-law's master was just such a person. He was part of a centuries-old line of ninja who went back deep into Japan's feudal history. Men and women who had dedicated their lives to healing and to death. Some of them possessed a vast knowledge of herbal medicine, meditation, and acupuncture to such a high level that it has not been rivaled even by today's practitioners of those arts. My father-in-law spoke of his master being able to diagnose illness and dis-ease just by looking at someone drinking a cup of tea. While I am not able to say much more about his master, I have been told he was against violence and always advocated the use of non-violent tactics to achieve one's goals. He also felt that battles should be undertaken by leaders rather than by foot soldiers. Over the years, my father-in-law was trained in each separate art of ninjutsu by a number of masters, and even after more than 50 years of experience, often spoke of how he had not learned that much due to his being a bad student. At this point, I should explain a little bit about ninjutsu as I know it. Some textbooks and authors will translate ninjutsu as the art of the assassin. This may be a good definition for a Hollywood movie, but it is simplistic and juvenile in reality. Ninjutsu encompasses many sub-arts such as tumbling, object throwing, balance, botany, bone setting, silent movement, astronomy, camouflage, deception, negotiation, persuasion, hand-to-hand combat, using weather conditions to one's favor, weapons training, body weight exercises, and various forms of subterfuge, to name but a few. It is said that the art was born out of a need to maintain balance within Japanese society. Sorry, I made a mistake. At times in Japan's history, certain factions became too strong, and society was ruled by brutal dictatorships. During these times, feudal lords were required to show allegiance to the shogun, who was the military dictator, and any sign of dissent meant heads would roll, literally as in being chopped off. To maintain a balance between good and evil, the ninja clans were born. As their identities were unknown, they could move relatively easily within different areas and carry out any mission necessary. While many modern-day ninja have no idea, While many modern-day Japanese have no idea of the ninja's true purpose and the important role they played in their country's history, we all owe a huge amount of gratitude to these hidden men and women who spent their lives striving to keep the peace when possible and eliminating those who would do harm to society when necessary. It must be noted here that my father-in-law firmly believed that the feudal system in Japan never went away. It simply morphed into a form that modern-day Japanese would accept. Now that you have a brief introduction to my father-in-law, let us get on with the focus of this book, which is the emails he sent to me and my family after we left Japan in early 2011 and moved to Malaysia. These emails continued for almost 7 years, which covered our whole time in Malaysia. I have divided each year into 4 parts: winter, summer, spring, and fall. I began with winter because this is the time of the year my family and I left Japan, and it signifies the conditions in Japan as we left. And then I go on to acknowledge that if there are any errors in this book, grammar, spelling, sentence construction, or whatever, it's all my responsibility. You know, I've been a teacher for over 20 years. I've trained teachers for more than 10 years. I'm the last guy who should be making any kind of mistakes with the language. However, I am human, and so I do make mistakes, I know that. I had no one else helping me with this book. At times my wife helped me translate things. Otherwise, things were translated from Japanese to English, and I tried very hard to preserve the original message as accurately as possible. Okay, let me move on to what is written here. Lastly, I need to make 2 important nuts and bolts points. First, I must let you know that anything in parentheses has been added by me. Okay, that's if you have the book in front of you, which you don't. Let's see, the email entries from my father-in-law in this book are from 2011 and 2012. I chose these 2 years as they were the first 2 years I received emails from my father-in-law, and because they were significant for numerological reasons. I chose to employ a bit of numerology as many ninjas were adept at understanding the significance of numbers and their effect on the outcome of events. That's very interesting, isn't it? Because we know various elites and, people talk about the Illuminati or whatever. People, what's behind the scenes, whoever's controlling things behind the scenes, they also use numerology. Yeah, it's very powerful. It's very powerful stuff. And the ninja were well aware of this. Okay, getting back to what's written. There are 36 email entries for each year times 2 years, which gives us 72 entries in total. Those 2 numbers, 36 and 72, were favorites of my father-in-law's as he felt they represented energies that were in harmony with his character. There are other numbers employed within the book, and I leave you, the reader, or in this case the listener, to decipher them. After all, my father-in-law, the ninja, believed that making someone work for an answer meant true learning would take place because the knowledge does not simply stay on the skin, but gets internalized. And that concludes the introduction for my book, Emails from a Ninja. And in my next video, I will start Chapter 1, which is the winter of 2011. Okay, I hope you like the introduction here. Please leave a comment. Let me know what you think. And I'd like to make this a weekly thing. Okay, everybody, you guys take care, and thank you for your support here on Patreon.